What do you do when the sky fills with drones, missiles skim the water, and fast attack boats rush your ship from the dark at the exact same moment? Because for one American destroyer in the Strait of Hormuz, that nightmare did not stay a warning on a screen. It became a fight that could have changed the balance of the whole region in minutes. Before we go 1 second deeper, do this with me right now. Tap like if you love smart military stories, subscribe if you want more breakdowns like this, and share this video with the one friend who thinks modern war is just about bigger weapons. Just before sunrise, the sea looked peaceful. That is what makes moments like this so dangerous. They never arrive with dramatic music, and they do not announce themselves. They slip in under routine, under silence, under the false comfort of another normal morning. The destroyer was moving through one of the most sensitive waterways on Earth, the Strait of Hormuz. It is narrow, crowded, and impossible to ignore. A huge share of the world's oil moves through that passage. If traffic there is threatened, markets react, governments panic, and militaries start calculating how fast local clash can turn into a global crisis. On that morning, the ship was doing what powerful navies do every day. It was holding a line without firing a shot. Presence was the mission. Stability was the message. Stay open. Keep moving. Do not blink. But someone on the shoreline had already decided that message needed a reply. Far off the Iranian coast, tracking teams had been watching the transit. They knew the route. They knew the timing. They knew that if they were going to test an American warship, they had to do it with speed, confusion, and pressure for more than one direction at once. A swarm. The idea was simple and brutal. One missile is manageable. Many threats from different heights, speeds, and angles force choices, and in war, too many choices create mistakes. That chance was the real weapon. At first, nothing looked wrong. Radar looked clean. The bridge stayed calm. Voices were measured, systems watched. Sailors scanned screens they had seen 1,000 times before. Then the picture exploded. Passive sensors picked up emissions. Air tracks started forming. Signals intelligence in the area detected a surge in military communications. A warning came in fast, then another, then another. Low-flying objects were moving toward the ship. More contacts were rising behind them. Surface movement appeared in the clutter near the coast. Within seconds, the destroyer stopped being a ship in transit. It became the center of a live combat puzzle. The bridge mattered, but the real heartbeat of the fight was deeper inside the ship, in the Combat Information Center. No windows, no horizon, just screens, voices, symbols, decisions, and the pressure of knowing every delay gives the enemy more room. This is the side of naval warfare. Most people never see information. Who sees first, understands first, and reacts first? That morning, speed of thought mattered almost as much as speed of weapons. The first incoming threats were cruise missiles, low and fast, the kind built to hug the surface and arrive with very little warning. They do not need much time to kill. They are designed to close distance before crews can breathe, let alone relax. But the destroyer was not blind, and it was not alone. American surveillance aircraft were already in the broader battle space, listening, watching, feeding data. Nearby assets were sharing tracks. What looked like one ship from the outside was, in reality, part of a much larger network. That distinction would decide everything. The moment the air picture hardened, interceptors were launched. Vertical launch cells cracked open, missiles punched into the morning sky. From a distance, it would have looked almost unreal. Bright flashes and smoke columns rising from a ship that seconds earlier seemed to be gliding through empty water. Then came the first proof that the attack was real. 2 inbound tracks vanished in hard bursts of light. Interception. No hit, no fire, no loss of control. But the attack was never built around one wave. This was an attempt to overload the entire defensive system. As cruise missile tracks began dropping away, slower contacts kept appearing farther back. Drones, more of them, then more behind those. Enough to suggest that this was not an improvised strike. It was planned as a layered attack, built to exhaust attention, ammunition, and time. That is what makes drone warfare so dangerous. A single cheap drone may not look impressive beside a modern destroyer, but war is a contest of cost, timing, and saturation. If one side can throw dozens of low-cost threats into the air while the other answers with expensive systems, the math becomes part of the battle. If enough threats keep coming, eventually something slips through. That was the theory behind this assault, and it nearly worked. The outer defense began thinning the drone wave before it could fully compress on the ship. Aircraft on patrol moved to engage. Every drone destroyed at distance meant one less decision for the crew at sea. But this came with its own danger. When fighters and ship-launched missiles operate in the same zone, everything has to be coordinated with extreme care. One wrong lane, one mistimed launch, one bad handoff, and the defender creates a second crisis inside the first. So the battle became a violent test of choreography. Fighters shifted position. Surface-to-air missiles blasted through cleared corridors. New targets appeared behind old ones. Some drones were destroyed far out. Others survived long enough to push inward. And that is when the emotional reality of combat closes in. At long range, targets are symbols. At short range, they become consequences. One drone kept a goal coming. That matters more than people realize, because the last surviving threat in a wave carries a kind of psychological weight. It is not just a machine anymore. It becomes the question every sailor feels at once. Did we do enough? The destroyer's final defensive layer spun up. A close-in weapon system built for the exact nightmare of a leaker getting too close, locked on and opened fire. A violent burst, seconds at most. Metal into the air at astonishing speed. The drone broke apart before impact. Fragments hit the water, close enough to be seen, close enough to be felt. And that is the difference between a clean briefing room success and the lived experience of survival. On paper, the ship was still unharmed. In human terms, the margin had already become terrifyingly thin, but the sky was only half the problem. Surface contacts were now closing. Fast attack boats, small, aggressive, built for harassment and sudden violence, were charging in while the ship was still managing the air battle. This is what multi-axis pressure is designed to do. Even if the boats cannot sink a destroyer alone, they force attention sideways. They make commanders, divide their focus. They create noise inside the decision loop, and noise kills. The captain faced a brutal choice: keep radar priority on the biggest missile threat, or maneuver harder against the boats and accept weaker coverage elsewhere. There was no perfect answer, only a hierarchy of danger. Combat is often not about choosing between good and bad. It is about choosing between bad and worse. The ship held priority on the deadliest air threats. The boats kept coming. Rockets splashed nearby. Guns answered from the ship. Water kicked up. Courses adjusted. The destroyer did not panic, but it could not ignore the harassment either. Every turn mattered. Every degree changed geometry. Every second spent balancing one threat gave another one time to breathe. Meanwhile, the drone count kept building. This is where the attack became more than dramatic. It became strategic. Because what the attackers were really testing was not just armor or missile range. They were testing whether a modern naval force could stay coherent under stacked pressure. Could it track dozens of things at once? Could it share targeting data fast enough? Could it preserve expensive interceptors? Could it prevent a cheap mass attack from creating a propaganda victory even without sinking a ship? Those are modern war questions. And they matter because weak actors do not need perfect military parity anymore. They need enough tools to create friction, headlines, and uncertainty. And that is why swarms matter. That is why choke points matter. And that is why every Navy studies scenarios like this with obsessive seriousness. Minute by minute, the defense adjusted. Outer air cover cut down more drones. Shipboard missiles handled the threats that got closer. Deck guns and close-in weapons stood ready for anything that slipped through. The surface attackers lost momentum. The first shock of the assault began to flatten. And then something important happened. The defenders did not merely survive the opening storm. They started understanding it. In the beginning of an ambush, the attacker owns surprise. But if the defender absorbs the first blow, keeps communications intact, and sees enough of the pattern, surprise begins to die. Once that happens, the ambush starts turning into a hunt. And the people who launched this assault were about to learn that the hard way. Before we continue, here is your second checkpoint. If this story is making you rethink what real combat at sea looks like, hit subscribe, and leave a like, and send this video to somebody who still believes drones are just side notes in modern war. The details matter, and sharing this helps more people see the full picture. By now, the attackers had spent much of their opening pressure, and they had also revealed themselves. Communications had been intercepted. Launch patterns had been observed. Movement on the surface had been tracked. Retreat routes were taking shape on American screens even before the first phase of the battle was fully over. A naval fight is not only about what explodes in front of the camera. It is also about what gets mapped and followed after the first exchange. And the destroyer and supporting forces were not thinking only about the next incoming object. They were also thinking about the next move behind the attack. Where were the drones launched from? Where were the boats going back to? What were the controllers preparing next? Was this the whole operation, or just the opening act? Those questions mattered because if the attackers could reload and reorganize quickly, the danger was not over. It was simply changing shape. And sure enough, the picture behind the horizon started sharpening. The withdrawing boats were tracked toward a staging point near shore. Equipment activity was spotted. Fresh supplies appeared to be moving in. That suggested intent, not fear, not surrender. Intent. This had not been a one-off message strike. It looked more like a campaign move meant to pressure shipping, challenge escorts, and show that the waterway could be turned into managed chaos whenever someone chose. Because once you think the enemy wants a second punch, you stop rewarding them with patience. You start preparing to break the cycle. The American response began building in layers, just like the defense had. Electronic warfare assets would suppress sensors. Strike aircraft would remove immediate air defense threats. Attack platforms would finish exposed targets. The goal was not random revenge. It was controlled dismantling. Remove the tools that make the next ambush possible. That matters both militarily and psychologically. If the attackers get to fire, retreat, reload, and repeat, they keep the initiative even when they fail tactically. But if retreat itself becomes dangerous, if regrouping becomes visible, if support sites get hit before a second wave can form, the whole logic of harassment starts breaking down. Soon the counterstroke moved from planning to action. Electronic attack came first. This is one of the least cinematic but most decisive parts of modern war. Often, victory begins by blinding the other side, confusing it, and denying it a clean picture. That is what jamming does when used well. It does not need to destroy a radar. It only needs to break trust between the screen and the operator. Once trust breaks, reaction slows and kill chains collapse. As the defenders moved to exploit that opening, aircraft pushed toward the suspected staging area. Threats guarding it had to be removed quickly. Gun positions, air defense nodes, anything that could threaten the next wave of aircraft or protect boats preparing another run. This was not a movie charge. It was methodical. Suppress, clear, strike, confirm, then continue. Meanwhile, the surface story from the first clash was becoming clearer. The destroyer had not simply been lucky. It had benefited from layered defense, network awareness, disciplined prioritization, and crews who did not unravel under pressure. That combination is far more important than any single weapon. Hardware matters, yes, but hardware under stress is only as good as the people managing the chaos around it. Imagine the emotional temperature on that ship. Sailors hearing call-outs stack on top of each other, operators watching tracks merge and split, command decisions made with incomplete certainty. The knowledge that one mistake could put fire, flooding, or mass casualties into a steel hull far from easy rescue. That is the human core of this story. Not just missiles and drones, but human beings staying functional while everything around them tries to force panic. Emotional discipline is a weapon in its own right, because panic burns options and calm preserves them. Back near the shoreline, the counterattack found what the first battle had hinted at. Boats that had rushed the convoy were no longer anonymous shapes in open water. They were part of a system with reload points, support crews, local protection, and a plan for what came next. Once a system is identified, it becomes targetable. That is the nightmare for anyone using swarming harassment tactics. They depend on speed, deniability, and rapid reappearance. The moment their pattern becomes visible, every launch point starts looking less like a hidden edge and more like a fixed liability. Explosions followed. Positions were hit. Boats at rest became easier prey than boats in motion. The very platforms that had hoped to create chaos on the open water now faced the opposite problem. They were trapped inside someone else's surveillance picture. Here is the deeper lesson. Modern warfare is not only about who can attack. It is about who can remain hidden after attacking. If you can shoot and disappear, you create recurring fear. If you shoot and stay visible, you may win a headline but lose the campaign. The attackers had generated drama, but they had also left fingerprints all over the battle space. Signals, heat, movement, coordination. That opened the door for punishment. And punishment sends messages faster than diplomacy in contested waters. At this point, global observers would be reading the event through very different lenses. Energy markets would worry about shipping. Regional states would worry about escalation. Military planners would study interceptor use, drone density, and timing between layers. Propaganda networks would search for a story they could spin. But underneath all those reactions sat one stubborn reality. The destroyer was still afloat, the convoy was still moving, and the waterway had not been closed. That outcome matters more than loud claims after the fact. Because in strategic choke points, control is not declared. It is demonstrated. And on that day, control belonged to the side that absorbed the strike and kept traffic alive. Still, the most uncomfortable truth remained. The attack had exposed a real vulnerability. Cheap, unmanned systems can create expensive defensive problems. Even when the defender wins, the cost exchange may be ugly. This is one reason militaries around the world are racing to improve anti-drone doctrine, directed energy systems, electronic attack options, and smarter ways to conserve high-end missiles. Everyone sees the same future coming. The side that solves volume cheaply gains a serious edge. So no, the lesson here is not simple invincibility. It is not the destroyer won, end of story. A capable navy can survive and dominate even under swarm pressure, but only if its systems talk to each other, its crews stay disciplined, and its commanders keep making good decisions under stress. Take one of those pieces away and the story may end very differently. It is not a fantasy of perfect defense. It is a demonstration of how thin the line really is. One more drone getting through, one delay in target sharing, one confused air lane, one wrong turn while balancing boats and missiles, and a tactical success story becomes a national shock. And that is why professionals study near-successful defenses with the same intensity they study disasters. Because the goal is not to admire survival, it is to understand the margin. The pressure in Hormuz eventually eased, but the meaning of the engagement did not. The message spread instantly across every serious military office that cared about contested maritime zones. The age of swarming. That is how military competition works. Every failed attack is also a lesson for the attacker. Every successful defense is also a warning for the defender. If you are still with me, here is a different kind of mission. Like this video, if you want more stories told with real depth, subscribe so you do not miss the next breakdown, and share it with someone who loves strategy but rarely gets the full human side of it. That support helps this channel keep going deeper than the headlines. Now step back and look at the full shape of what happened. A destroyer entered one of the most dangerous waterways in the world. An enemy force tried to bury it under overlapping pressure from the sky and the sea. Cruise missiles came fast, drones came in numbers, boats came in close. The goal was not only to hit steel, it was to fracture confidence. If the ship had been damaged, even lightly, the story would have raced across the world. Insurance rates would jump, shipping decisions would change, allies would question risk, rivals would celebrate proof that even the most advanced navies can be crowded into hesitation by cheaper tools. That is why this battle matters beyond the metal. It was about narrative power as much as tactical force. Could a regional actor create enough danger to shake the image of American control in a vital choke point? That was the wager, and for a few intense minutes, the answer hung in the air. But the defenders did something crucial. They refused to let the attack define the pace forever. They absorbed, adapted, tracked, answered, and then reached back toward the source. That sequence is the essence of mature military power, not merely striking hard, but striking after understanding. That difference separates anger from strategy. It also explains why the ending of this story feels so powerful. The destroyer did not just escape a trap, it helped expose the trap makers to consequences that turned survival into dominance. And yet, the most haunting part may be how ordinary the morning looked before it began. That is the real face of modern danger. Crisis does not always build with obvious warning. Sometimes it waits inside normal traffic, normal weather, normal procedure, and then arrives all at once fast enough to punish even a small lapse. That is true at sea, in the air, and anywhere technology allows weak and strong forces to collide asymmetrically. The Strait of Hormuz remains one of the clearest places on Earth where that collision can happen. Geography compresses options there. Politics sharpens motives there. Energy dependence magnifies outcomes there. Even when no shots are fired, the water carries tension like static before a storm. So when a swarm attack erupts there, it is never just a local event. It becomes a signal to the world about what the next generation of conflict may look like. Smaller tools, faster decisions, cheaper pressure, higher stakes, less warning, and people forced to make life and death choices inside that storm. Think about the crew after the engagement started cooling down. The noise drops. Adrenaline fades just enough for the body to notice what happened. Hands shake. A little. Voices settle. Someone replays a near miss in their mind. Someone else realizes how close that last drone really came. Training carried them through the moment, but reflection catches up later. That is true in every profession that deals with violence, and it is especially true in enclosed worlds like ships, where there is no easy distance from what almost happened. Behind every tactical diagram are real people asked to function under conditions most viewers will thankfully never experience. And behind every swarm, every missile launch, every fast boat charge is a deeper, strategic contest about who can control fear in the modern age. Can fear close trade routes? Can fear scare escort forces into caution? Can fear make a powerful military spend itself faster than its enemy? Those are the real questions, and the destroyer's survival answered them with a hard no. Not because the threat was fake or the attackers were foolish, but because layered defense, shared awareness, and disciplined crews proved stronger than coordinated chaos. That does not make the danger disappear. It makes the standard clearer. Any Navy that wants to survive the future has to prepare for the same kind of test. More drones than expected, more noise than expected, more overlap than expected, and almost no time to think. In that sense, this was not just one violent morning in Hormuz. It was a preview of the battles to come. Not giant fleets smashing in open oceans like old paintings, but networks fighting networks, cheap systems trying to bend expensive ones, surveillance racing concealment, algorithms supporting courage, and humans still carrying the final burden of choice. That is why this story stays with you, because beneath the weapons and tactics, it reveals something bigger. Modern war is no longer only about who can hit hardest. It is about who can stay coherent while the world turns chaotic around them. And on that morning in the Strait of Hormuz, coherence won. That victory kept ships moving. It kept a strategic corridor open. It protected lives. And it sent a message across the region that volume alone is not enough when the other side can still see, still think, and still strike back. So the next time someone says naval warfare is just old steel floating on water, remember this scene. A destroyer under pressure from every direction. A swarm built to crack its defenses. A crew forced into split-second choices. And an outcome decided not by one miracle weapon, but by layers, discipline, and the refusal to break. That is the image to carry with you. Not just fire in the sky, but order holding inside the fire. That may be the most important military advantage of all. And if that image stayed with you, then you already understand why this encounter matters far beyond one ship, one strait, or one morning. It shows us the future in miniature. It shows us how fragile control can look and how powerful disciplined response can be when everything is designed to make it fail. The attackers tried to turn the Strait of Hormuz into a spectacle of vulnerability. Instead, they revealed something else. They revealed how modern power survives, not by assuming calm, but by preparing for chaos. And when chaos came, the destroyer answered, still moving, still fighting, still there.